Yes, everyone, welcome back to the IrishHotspur. Here we are going to be giving our reaction to Igor Tudor being the new Spurs manager. He's being in charge of Spurs now to try to save us from relegation, taking over from Thomas Frank's disastrous season. He's been a bit of a fireman in his career as a manager to try to improve things or at least have positive impact pretty much straight away. And we're hoping he's going to be able to do that here with Spurs. And he has an easy game ahead of him with the North London Derby being his first one. Great time to throw in an interim manager, but I think this needs to happen. We'll be giving our reactions to it, our thoughts on the decision to go with him, thoughts on the decision to go with an interim manager and sack Thomas Frank, all of that good stuff. We just had some busy weekends. So we weren't able to go straight away live with it. So now we are going to be giving our reactions. Good to see some people already in the house with us. If you can, please do smash the like button, get into the comments, and we will be going all over Igor Tudor and what he could be bringing to Tottenham Hotspur. But first, we're just going to be reading the club statement, any sort of bits and quotes here. When it comes to the manager, they said that we are pleased to confirm the appointment of Igor Tudor as men's head coach until the end of the season, subject to the work permit. Igor joins us with a clear focus to improve performances, to deliver results, and move us up the Premier League table. His mandate is straightforward: bring organization, intensity, and competitive edge to the squad at a decisive stage of the campaign. Speaking about his rival, Igor said, "It is an honor to join this club at an important moment. I understand the responsibility I have been handed, and my focus is clear: to bring greater consistency to our performances and compete with conviction in every match. There is strong quality in this playing squad, and my job is to organize it, energize it, and improve our results quickly." On the appointment, Johan Lange said Igor brings clarity, intensity, and experience of stepping into challenging moments and producing impact. Our objective is straightforward: to stabilize performances, maximize the quality within the squad, and compete strongly in the Premier League and the Champions League. He's a Serie A title winner with Juventus. Lots of just bits about his time as a
Yeah.
coach we'll get into. To be honest, I actually didn't want to hear anything from Johan Lange, Dave. I feel like this
No.
guy should just remain quiet until he hopefully is sacked in the summer. But anything to take from these quotes? I guess part of it is that he's supposed to be bringing consistency, they said, and he is supposed to be improving the performances as well as deliver results. Hopefully that is the case, I guess, with Tudor.
Well, like when you look at, his managerial career in general, he is sort of a guy that has mainly been employed mid-season to save clubs' fortunes. And to a large degree, he's done that, which we'll get onto a little bit deeper as we go along. And also the style of play, he is known for an intense style of play in and out of possession, which you would argue when we had Thomas Frank was his biggest flaw. We'd often sit
Yeah.
back off teams, go one or two down. And then in the second half, all of a sudden, all the restrictions are taken off, nothing to lose. We go for it. We're getting back into games, or at least close to getting back into games. And when we were winning games at the start of the season, why were we winning games? We were pressing teams high up intently. And I guess that's what they're hoping this guy is going to bring to Tottenham Hotspur.
Yeah, it could not have gotten any worse, really, with Thomas Frank. Best of luck to Igor. He has a big task in front of him. He's got a lot of injuries he has to deal with, but it really couldn't have gone much worse with Thomas Frank. It felt like we were relegation bound, and now I think Spurs fans can have something to look forward to. It's not ideal, of course, but it is maybe something that could rejuvenize or, kind of just have the team as well as the fan base, kind of feel like maybe there is something to be hopeful for, something to look forward to, because it really did feel like it was just headed down a very bad path with Thomas Frank. And I felt like kind of where Spurs fans were already kind of giving up really on the rest of the season. Whereas now with this interim manager, maybe there is something to look forward to, something to be, re-energized by.
But like the thing is, I hear a lot of people sort of, within the media and that say, oh, well, Thomas Frank would never have got Spurs relegated. He would have kept them up. 2 wins in our last 17 Premier League games and careering towards relegation sort of tells a
Yeah.
complete different story. And I think when I hear people in the media say that, I think it's just based off feelings rather than what the facts were actually telling us, to be brutally honest.
Yeah, exactly. Like if he also as well, like in his time here was literally the worst top six Premier League manager in history when it came to his win percentage.
Mm.
That already tells you that, this just the guy maybe just wasn't cut out for the job really. Gonna welcome in some people, say hello to you guys, and then we'll get this show underway and ask some serious questions about this interim manager. Matt Bynum saying big up Dave and Jack. I'm praying for some definitive changes to how we actually approach the game on
Yeah.
Sunday. Meeting my son James at the stadium.
Nice.
Can Igor bring any joy when you're down to the bare bones? you could describe as a bit of a free hit for him this weekend, Dave. But as long as we keep it competitive, I guess that's all we're looking forward to be honest, this Sunday. I think we would have gotten walloped if Frank was in charge, to be honest. But maybe with Igor, potentially it could be a little bit better.
Look, it'd be interesting to see how much this guy can actually implement and get across within a week, and with the bare bones available. But saying that, it's not impossible. Look what Michael Carrick is at Man United with, a change in style, a change in voice, and a fresh approach and stuff like that. They're able to go and put on a streak, and that's exactly what we need from this guy. And when it comes to North London Derby specific, I mean, maybe the unknown might actually help us. Look, I'd rather go into the North London Derby with an unknown factor under Tudor than going in and approaching it the exact same way we did against Frank earlier on in the season and listening to how great Arsenal are, this, that, and the other. Because you're almost beating yourself before you go into the game. So what I will say is it gives us a chance. Now, it's going to be a difficult one. They're flying high at the minute and, they're careering towards the title at the minute. But it's our job to stop them. And hopefully, this guy can instill enough within the week and a fresh change. We can actually make a better go of the game.
Yeah. Stefan Blois saying, big up, guys. Going to enjoy this stream with some steak and chips. Come on.
Oh, you're making
very
me jealous,
Stefan. Very jealous, Stefan. Good
God,
to have you with us.
With that. Anything else is a crime.
Matt saying, we need joy, something to get behind, and a reason to care. I think you hit all the nails on the head there, Matt. Tyler saying, Tudor is to do. Come on, new Spurs. We stay up and win the Champions League. I wonder how he's going to handle the Champions League, of course, and I think his priority is going to be able to stay up in the Premier League. But if he's able to achieve that relatively quickly, then we can maybe try to replicate a season at Anchad where we feel like we're safe from relegation, but then we also have this European competition that we can maybe look to prioritize. I think if things went really well for him, he picks up a few wins in the next couple of games or so, kind of distances ourselves with the relegation threat, and then we can maybe look to prioritize the Champions League. But it is probably about staying up in the Premier League first and foremost, Tyler.
Look, when you look at this guy's sort of record, because I see a lot of this, Tyler's not the only one that's sort of on that. I've seen it all over socials the weekend and, stuff like that. But when you look at it, this guy's record is more based on the league than what he's ever done in European football. In fact, I don't even think he's got a good European record in general. He finished, I think, bottom of the group with Marseille in the same group we were in. I think there was a team out, Pauk out in the Greek. I think, he ended up getting knocked out in the second round qualifier, in terms of that. So in Europe, he doesn't actually have a good record. It's more the league where he has a good record. And that's what our focus is right now, is maintaining that.
Unfortunately. Yeah, unfortunately. Moondog, good to have you with us. Thank you for the support. Good evening, Dave and Jack. Good to have you, Moondog. And he's saying, come on, you Spurs as well. 50 months as a member as well. So thank you, Moondog. Very, very generous support.
Hopefully you're re-energized under this new guy, Moondog. Yeah. I know you haven't been around in a while. I don't blame you. I mean, look, Tottenham has sucked the life out of fucking every single one of us this season. But hopefully now this gives you some, more motivation to stick with Tottenham between now and the end of the season. Big up, Moondog.
Exactly. Hopefully Charlie's okay. And hopefully you have a bit of resurgence as a Spurs fan, knowing that Igor Tudor, our new manager, is in charge. Big up to you, Moondog. Shem10 saying, hey, Jack and Dave, hope you're both doing good today. Doing all right, Shem. Hopefully everything's good with you. Hey. Neil's in the house as well. Sebas is in here saying, what's going on, boys? Big up. Good to have you, Sebas. Tom THFC, good to have you as well. Laren Deb saying, welcome, Igor. All the best to you. Our team is in shambles. Please help us. Exactly. He's got a big job ahead of him. Colin Turner, hopefully he realizes just how big a problem we face purely looking at our injury list. We must all get behind him. The fans can play a big part in this. I think, we needed to go for an interim manager probably a month or two ago, to be honest, Colin. But at this stage of the season, it is kind of up to us fans just to try to, in a sense, get behind this team and this manager as much as we can. I think we all knew that it was headed down a very bad path with Thomas Frank. I didn't blame people for starting to feel a little bit disillusioned with the team, with the club, with the season. But now this is an opportunity to potentially give ourselves, something else to look forward to, something to really get behind, and really just for survival purposes, to be honest, Colin.
I just think the change in itself will naturally get fans back behind it. I think everyone had lost all motivation under Thomas Frank. I think the change in manager itself, you will see a rejuvenated sort of atmosphere. When it comes to injuries, it is something I'm going to speak a little bit about later on. I do have one concern around that.
The Two Mark Show. Good evening, fellas. Good to have you, Mark. Really appreciate your support. Jay is in the house as well. Steve is in here. Good to have you, Steve. To answer your question, yes, Tudor can rescue this team from relegation by keeping things simple while bringing confidence to the group. It is probably as well about kind of, sparking that bit of positivity in the camp as well. He is going to have to do that to try to get these players to start believing in themselves again. Mary W saying, hi, guys. The only way is up. Yeah, it couldn't have gone much worse, Mary. So now the only way to go is up from here.
Yeah.
Good to have you, by the way, Mary. Really do appreciate your support. Sully's in the house as well. Good to have you, Sully. Dermatron member for 47 months. New start for us. We will stay up with Tom. New start for us. We will stay up with Thomas Frank. He never changed, but it's time to bring back Poch and hope we can build to bigger times ahead. We will rise again because we are Tottenham. The fact that they have hired an interim manager, Dermatron, does suggest that this summer they will be going for someone like a Pochettino, a Nagelsmann, whoever is a big name that might be available this summer. Who knows? Maybe it might even be Uriolo. We know whose contract is up. We know they've tried to go after him in the past, but it does seem clear, Dave, that Spurs are going to take the interim approach, and then they're probably going to look to make a big managerial signing this summer.
Yeah, well, I think, anyone that was big up Storm approaching, back to Dermo. And I think anyone that was thinking we were going to get a permanent sort of successor between now and the end of the season, I think, would have been wide of the mark. I don't think Tottenham were ever going to do that. I think it's clear that we were going to bring in someone between now and the end of the season. And I think it's just pretty clear that Pochettino is going to come in after the World Cup, in my opinion.
Yeah. Tyler saying it's a tough ask with all the injuries, but I believe you'll get a much better tune out of the players. Good to hear that from UT. Jay Bear, John, good to have you, John, saying, hey, all, I am hopeful that Igor can keep us up as long as the injuries don't get any worse and we get some of the injured lads back soon. Hard to remember which ones are coming back soon. I feel like Kudus is not too far away from coming back because I think they said his was up until March. Poros was about a month. I think Destiny Udogis was around a month or two as well. We do have Jet Spence just returning. And then apart from that, I can't think of any others that are coming back really soon. I mean, Kevin Danzo, didn't they say he might be out for like the rest of the season or something like that? Kevin Danzo, that would be a good help considering we're playing a back three, John, with Igor Tudor. It'd be great to have Kevin Danzo alongside Van de Ven and Romero. Unfortunately, it might have to be Radu Dragic being given a stint and a spell here, but trying to think of any other injuries, John, to be honest, that will be returning. But yeah, we can't afford any more. The fact that Odebear, Thomas Frank's parting gift was Odebear being out for the rest of the season was just a huge blow, especially if we are going to go with a front three, which I think is how Igor Tudor might go about things in terms of how he'll go with his front line. It would have been great to have someone like Odebear still to pick from and maybe compete and rotate with someone like a Muhammad Kudus once he returns. So lots of injury blows. We can't afford any more. You're spot on, John.
I also think with Odebear out, I mean, this guy has worked with Mawani. He's one that we need to get firing. And if he can sort of get him going, then, it gives him a chance. But also, when it comes to injuries, one thing I want to say on it is I like the approach that this guy, if he brings what he's done at other clubs to Tottenham, with the intensity out of possession is something I was screaming about under Thomas Frank. But also, the intensity in possession, he likes to be a bit more direct with our play and stuff like that. So I'm sort of excited about that. However, with that, it becomes demands similar to Ange Postecoglou, right? In terms of the demands to be able to play that style, and you are more susceptible to injuries. And that's the one thing around this appointment where I am generally skeptical. Because we already have a lot of injuries as is. And if he comes in and plays this intense brand of football, which everyone is expecting him to bring, and we get a couple more injuries, we're absolutely fucked. So that's the one area where maybe I'm a little bit skeptical around it. But at the end of the day, we had to roll the dice. It wasn't getting any better under Frank. I know I see Rob Spurs saying, Dave, you were screaming for Frank out. Sort of, you better hope this guy does well and stuff, which I understand, but the reality is it wasn't getting any better under Frank, and it's not like I was screaming for Frank out. I was screaming from the very beginning we should never have even given him a job. He should never have been at this football club. And at the end of the day, where we were, we had to take a gamble. Whether it's going to work or not is another thing coming, but we had to take the gamble.
Felt like we were screaming for Frank out unfairly as well. Like the man was driving us single-handedly to relegation, and also as well, like Dave brought up, 2 wins in 17 games, worst win percentage of any Spurs manager in recent times, worst win percentage of any top 6 Premier League manager in history. I mean, the stats were not pretty when it came to Thomas Frank. So wanting Thomas Frank out, it's not necessarily a bold thing to say. I think it was probably just the case that we saw sort of the signs of it happening pretty quickly, maybe whereas others wanted to keep faith and patience with him. But to be Frank out, I don't think is in any way a bad thing. And also, to be honest, Igor Tudor could not do any worse than Thomas Frank at this point.
And the thing is, it's not like I was screaming for this guy out for no reason. I gave all my reasons at the very beginning why I thought it was a bad appointment. and all of them became true. So it's not like I didn't have my reasoning behind it. It's not like I'm just sitting here going, get him out because he's not winning games. There were so many reasons. I think I articulated them well at the very beginning that he should never have got the job.
Paolo Moratti, good to have you personally. I have more relief in Tudor than having to watch Frank and knowing we'll be crap. I hope he brings some good football. Supposedly he is. Supposedly he will bring a bit more of an intensity and aggression and plays a bit more direct than I think we did under Thomas Frank. Faz Radfar, the one and only. Good to have you in the house. Hope everything's good with you, Faz. I think this is Paul Markey saying we will go nowhere with the influences of Numpty Lange, wrecking any chance of progress. I do actually agree with you there, Paul. He has to go this summer. We'll be talking about him in just a sec.
I just want to say big up to Paul Brown as well. We missed you as well. Big up, Paul. Good to see you, sir. Hopefully you're keeping well.
Good to see you, Paul. Hopefully everything's good with you. My friend Tango bin Al Sheed, I'm seeing as well. Moondog saying I had the Spurs sucked out of me. I needed a break. Yeah, Moondog, I'm surprised you're still able to keep going, with all you've had to experience with Tottenham Hotspur. Like I said, it was headed down a very, very bad path with Thomas Frank. And just hopefully Igor Tudor can survive and be able to have us, believe in something, whether it's just finishing with a few wins at the end of the season, so we feel like maybe there is some positive performances towards the end. And then also Dave has said, his record in Europe hasn't been great, but maybe he can do a decent job in Europe and at least get us maybe past first couple of rounds. And then we could potentially have a quarterfinal or something to look forward to, which would be great. But it is about just saving our potential of being relegated. I mean, it's just that bad at the minute. Moondog. So I don't blame you if a little bit of the spirit of Spurs was sucked out of you this season.
What I was going to say to him is he's a lucky man. I think that's many people's dream to have the Spurs sucked out of them, my man.
Seriously. Paul Vamben, always good to have you, Paul. Good to have you. Mark P's in the house. Scotty Heinem's in the house. Good to have you guys. Really appreciate your support as members. Sean will be doing the fan show this Wednesday, by the way. Hopefully you can make it. And then Harmless Potato, member for 16 months. Come on, you Spurred. Good to have you, Harmless. One of the best names in the business. Really appreciate you. And just make sure I'm not missing too many people. Probably am, but do appreciate you guys. If, like I said, if you can, smash the like button. And if you want to ask us any questions or if you have any opinions or comments, do put them in the chat. And if you want to support the channel, you can do it as a super chat as well. And thank you to all the members that are joining us. But let's get this show underway. I guess first and foremost, Dave, we do just have to talk about the decision that was made by Vinay and Lange. Apparently, according to many journalists, they actually want to stick with Thomas Frank. It was the Lewis family that told them to sack Thomas Frank. They didn't want to, but they were overruled basically by the ownership. So this is also someone, an Igor Tudor, that Paratici had lined up to take over months ago. And apparently that was part of the reason why Paratici might have left, was because he wanted Thomas Frank sacked. Vinay and Lange disagreed with him, and so they kept him in charge. And then the one that Paratici wanted to bring in as probably an interim manager for the rest of the season was, in fact, Igor Tudor. So what do you make of that whole fiasco that Vinay and Lange wanted to keep Frank, and now all of a sudden they've gone to the guy that Paratici wanted months ago to take over from Frank?
Well, it just speaks of how much of a mess we're in,
Crazy.
right? It's absolutely crazy. And I think, given Paratici, he was banned, because of what he done at Juventus and stuff like that in terms of moving, helping them move money around and stuff like that. I think, maybe the Lewis family just didn't trust him to a certain degree, and they put all their eggs in Vinay and Johan Lange's basket. And, that was basically one of their first big decisions in terms of what personnel do you put your trust into. And they got it wrong. So it doesn't scream of a good indictment for their ownership moving forward. And look, even though Thomas Frank went, Johan Lange and Vinay should have followed. At the end of the day, they proved that they're incompetent. Their whole job is to bring in people that they believe is going to do the right job, and their whole job is to try and predict the outcomes. And they've completely failed in that regard. They took us to towards the relegation zone, so they should also be held accountable and sacked. And the fact that we're turning back to what Paratici wanted to do months ago, when we still had a chance of Europe, speaks of their incompetence, speaks of the board's incompetence in trusting them. And that was sort of this boys club in there where no one really wanted to pull the trigger on anyone, because it would have, A, it's an admittance they got it wrong, but B, all the stick goes up to them people and stuff like that. So that we're almost keeping Frank in a job so that they wouldn't have to take any of the stick, and all the focus was sort of on him. But none of them should be here. They should have went out the door along with Thomas Frank. Their job is to predict outcomes, and they got it completely wrong. I'm not being funny, but I'm a nobody. I predicted it in the summer how this was going to go. I'm on that basis, I'm probably more qualified for the job than they are. They shouldn't be here.
It just speaks of pure incompetence. The multi-channel saying Lange and Vinay are an insult to even clowns. Sean Maddox saying a good step from the Lewis family, but if they are actually serious, they need to chuck Vinay and Lange out as well. I just think the craziness about this is that they wanted to stick with Frank despite all of the signs and all of the words from the fan base that they wanted this guy gone. Like, as much as they had patience for Thomas Frank, as much as they wanted him to succeed, it seems like they were willing to go tone deaf with this fan base and just continue to have him in charge despite all the signs from the players, from the fans, that it was just not working and they didn't want him here anymore. They were willing to just stick with him, which is just crazy to me because even if you like the guy, you do have to listen to what your fan base are telling you at some stage. If they're calling for him to be sacked pretty much the last 5, 6 games at the club, if not longer than that, I mean, you got to listen at some stage. Like, and also it seemed like maybe the decision was made by the Lewis family because of probably the loss of revenue in the last few games. A lot of empty seats at big
But that's
games
why
at
it
the
was
Tottenham
made.
Hotspur Stadium. But,
It,
Vinay and Lange, they were willing to stick with him despite the loss of revenue. That's what's
but
just
also, so were
insane
the
to me.
Lewis family, though, Jack. So were
Yeah.
the Lewis family. They didn't put pressure on the guys to sack him. Months ago when results, like Igor Tudor was sacked at Juve for losing 8 on the row. We won 2 in 17 under Thomas Frank. And they didn't, I said this when they got sacked, they didn't sack him for footballing reasons. They sacked him because the stadium was half empty in the last game. And
And toxic.
and they couldn't
Yeah.
run the risk of it being like that for the North London Derby. Because if that was the case and there was tickets widely available for the North London Derby, people like, from Ireland that usually have massive trouble trying to just get one ticket, we're able to pick up multiple for it, with relative ease. And if we went into a North London derby and that stadium was half empty the way it was against Newcastle when Thomas Frank ended up getting the sack, then, all the media would have picked up on it. And then all of Tottenham's problems would have been highlighted and it would have been the focus of scrutiny for the next week in the footballing world. So they couldn't take that risk. That's why they made the change. It wasn't based on footballing reasons, which is why no one should trust the Lewis family moving forward.
Yeah. And it's just also further incompetence that since they were overruled and told by the ownership to sack Thomas Frank, I mean, it's just insane that even the ownership has to do that. Pretty much their job is just to hire people like Vinay and Lange to make the decisions for them because they're supposed to be the guys that are experienced and, have made these difficult decisions. But the fact that they had to just do it for them is just insane to me. But then also the fact that then Johan Lange and Vinay have now gone back to the one that Paratici wanted from the get-go to take over from Thomas Frank really just speaks to their incompetence. We'll talk about how it probably was the right decision, but it's just insane that like they're then going after the guy that is already, was lined up by Paratici, and Paratici's not even here anymore. I mean, would you go conspiracy theory, Dave, and actually suggest that maybe even Paratici helped out Spurs a little bit, maybe by hiring Igor Tudor? Or do you think they just,
No.
Johan Lange and Vinay went up to them themselves?
I don't think they had the trust in Johan and Vinay based off, how the whole Thomas Frank went. We considering they were the ones behind the appointment and recommending them for the job and everything. I don't think they had the trust in them to go and find another internal replacement that's going to keep us up. And that's why ultimately I think, when Paratici put Igor Tudor's name around, they would have obviously asked why at the time and stuff like that. And that's why they pivoted to that, even though he's no longer here.
Yeah. Good to
And
see you.
if they haven't trusted Vinay and Johan Lange to make that appointment themselves and they've gone off Paratici's sort of recommendation, then again, that makes them even more incompetent.
No, you are right. Big up to Sushan Busal. Good to have you in the house. Do really appreciate your support from New York. We also have Harmless Potato saying, I predicted weeks ago that after the Newcastle game, we would probably be the best time to sack Frank because he had such a tight schedule in December and January. In hindsight, I look like a genius again. Big up to you, Harmless. Dropkick your teacher with the super chat. Good to have you, Artist T, saying, had the weather been good last Tuesday, I guarantee he'd still be manager. Fans wouldn't have left early despite being down. And then he said as well, if they were really unhappy with the results, they would have did it after West Ham, Burnley, or even after the Arsenal embarrassed us. They're more upset about the empty seats. I think that's what it is, Artist T. I think that's what it had to do with, was just the loss of revenue, the fans starting to vote with their feet by just not going to the game, selling up their tickets, or just leaving them on the exchange. I think Billy T even said he's not going to go to pretty much another game this season. I wonder if he's changed his mind now that we have a new manager, but everyone just already was giving up on this team and on this manager and on this season. I think that was the reason why they pretty much made the decision. I think they want to stick with Frank no matter what. Of course, the right decision would have been to have sacked him and December or January when I don't know, the signs were already on the wall. Everything was written down that pretty much it wasn't going to go well with him. I do think it was just more of a financial decision than it really was out of form or out of any footballing reason.
And also, it's nothing to do with the weather, RST. Fans left, towards the end of the game because they were unhappy with what they were watching yet again. And when you're used to losing like that, from being in and around the stadium and that, a lot of people are trying to head home to beat the traffic, get home earlier so that they can get up for work the next day and stuff. It had absolutely nothing to do with the weather. If we were winning, everyone would have stuck there. And at the end of the day, the stadium wasn't just empty because people left. It looked worse when people were leaving early. But ahead of the game, it's something I highlighted on the pre-match build-up. There is going to be pockets of empty seats all over the place just from the amount in group chats and on socials where I see people offering up tickets or not taking tickets and stuff like that. So the atmosphere was already destined to be like that before the game.
Paul Van been saying sacking managers is generally a financial reason. Relegation in Europe means a huge drop in income. 100%, Paul. I think that was also part of it. It's just they knew that this is now a situation where we have to survive and we can't afford many seasons without Europe. They already kind of put that as a main reason for, I think other, sackings and that, you can't risk, not finishing in European spots considering this stadium, with the amount of revenue they can get from it. They want to be in Europe. In fact, they want to be in the Champions League. And we've been slipping further and further away from that over time.
But I think I do get what Paul is saying, but the reality is if it was for footballing reasons, we would have sacked them when we were 5-6 points adrift of Europe. You know what I mean? Like we were doing previous. This one is genuinely because the actual match day revenue was starting to take a massive hit.
Yeah. Harmless Potato saying all the reports strongly suggest that Parachichi was involved. Good to see Del Boy in the house. Good to see you, Phil, boys. Hopefully everything's all right with you, Phil. And then we have this from Paul Brown. Really appreciate your support, Paul, saying if Lange stays, worthless exercise.
I mean,
he's almost a bigger problem than even the manager, to be honest, Johan Lange. Like he really was he has been the worst. He's almost going to be worse than Steve Hitchen, if you ask me, Dave, Johan Lange. Like he's spent more money than even Parachichi has. And he's, I think, been around about as long as Parachichi has too. When Parachichi was on his own before Johan Lange was brought here, I think they both had around 2 summers or so, if I'm not mistaken. Just look at the players that Parachichi has signed in comparison to what Johan Lange has brought in. It's insane.
Well, I just think Johan Lange was on his own last summer, and that's the window you should really base him on. And last January, not this season under Frank, but the season before that under Ange. And Ange said it himself. I know a lot of people didn't agree with what Ange had to say, but one area where I did agree with him, and me and you actually tried to highlight this that summer. I think it got lost amongst all the Ange fans because their theory with Ange Postecoglou is the guy was Jesus and he could turn water into wine, but we tried to highlight it that he already set Ange Postecoglou up for failure that season when he brought in a load of teenagers. This guy's talking about going and winning trophies. And, when you're talking like that, there's a certain caliber of player you need. And we went and brought a load of teenagers and a lot of the signings were very underwhelming. And, that window alone, he should have been sacked. He failed to deliver what the manager needed at the end of the day, let alone still be even here to this day, making decisions over transfers, identifying players. Look how well that's fucking gone.
Yeah. Big up, Paul. And similar from Shem Tan here for 21 months as a member saying, can we get rid of all of them, please? Come on, you Spurs.
It's going to take mass protest.
Probably. I would expect and hope that Lange goes this summer. It'd be nice if Vinay did as well. But I do wonder, is Vinay going to be going this summer? I'm not too sure. Like he's only been in the job for a year, even though he's made his best effort of doing the worst possible job in the space of a year. Lange, surely that's the obvious one. But hopefully Vinay goes too, Shem. But I'm not too sure if that's going to happen.
Reading between the lines, I think Lange is gone. I think, the fact that they didn't trust him and Vinay to make the recommendation and bring in a guy, and they brought in a guy that Paratici actually recommended, months ago. I think Johan Lange would probably be gone before the summer. I would hope. If not, then we're fucked come the summer transfer window.
Yeah. And that's where I kind of agree with Paul. I kind of agree with Shem. I kind of agree with Sean Maddox, basically saying that's almost as bad as Thomas Frank was. We're still screwed, basically, if Lange stays in the job. It doesn't really make anything that much better with Lange still being here. He has to absolutely go. But do appreciate you guys. Clearly, Johan Lange is not a well-liked guy at Spurs. He absolutely must go. But Dave, there weren't really a lot of great options when it came to managers that could come in, interim managers to be specific, that had Premier League experience. You would say a Roy Hodgson, a Tim Sherwood, maybe a Harry Redknapp, was, put up for contention. But would you have preferred someone with Premier League experience, or are you all right with someone like Tudor who doesn't have any Premier League experience? Just specifically on that, were you originally preferring someone that has managed in the Premier League?
Sorry,
Oh,
my mom was
yeah,
just
yeah.
trying to ring me there. She obviously doesn't keep an eye on my channel, realizing that I'm streaming, so I'll have to get on to her about that after. But look, when it comes to the candidates that maybe were linked, you had the Zerbi, which is personally I would have took him, but he would have only took the job more on a long-term basis rather than the sort of interim basis. And a lot of fans were sort of skeptical around. Sometimes he can be a bit volatile, or teams end in a volatile sort of manner. I think when you look at Tim Sherwood, look, again, I think a lot of Tottenham fans, from what I'm seeing, don't really like the guy, don't understand it. I didn't think he done too bad when he was in charge before. And, he played for the club as well and always, wore his heart on his sleeve in that regard. But again, out of the game for a long time. Harry Redknapp, out of the game for a long time. Another name that was sort of, in the job. And I think when you look at this, they wanted someone that was clearly still in touch with maybe the modern day dressing room, because that is a huge factor, on how you live and die as a manager. You can clearly see that with the dressing room at Tottenham Hotspur. It's a huge factor, and you have to be able to relate to them some way. And I think that's the way they sort of base this decision around. Now, don't get me wrong, of all the candidates, he has the least Premier League experience, and that is a small concern of mine. Serie A, where he's had the bulk of his managerial
Yeah.
career, is completely different to the Premier League. The Premier League is more faster, it's more robust, it's more physical, it's more end-to-end, and a lot more teams employ a man-for-man press than what they do in the Serie A. So, that's where my concerns do come in. However, Thomas Frank had vast Premier League experience, and we were tanking quicker under him than what we have done under any previous manager before. So how much does Premier League experience really matter, nowadays? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, that's a great comment from Paul Van Ben and yourself, Dave, by saying that Thomas Frank had vast Premier League experience. It's not seemingly that important, really. Sean Maddox saying, honestly, experience saving a team from relegation is more valuable as well, which I think is a
And
very
this guy
valid
has
point.
vast experience in this.
Yeah, and when you kind of look at the guys that were available that technically had Premier League experience, most of them have not managed for a very long time. In the case of Roy Hodgson, in the case of someone like a Harry Redknapp, they're also very, very old. Like, and the last time that they managed in the Premier League was a while ago. And you just feel like maybe their days are kind of done really as managers. And Tim Sherwood, he was an all right interim manager for Spurs, but it has been, I think, close to 10 years or something since he's even taken up a managerial job. So you would almost prefer as well someone that has at least managed more recently in the modern game, and that is Igor Tudor. He has actually managed teams far more recently. So I would say that that's also a positive. But he has been labeled, Dave, as a bit of a fireman in the sense in that he has been at clubs for a short while, but it's mostly had positive influence on teams in terms of their form and rescuing them and having like a short initial impact in a good way. Have they gone for him basically because of his vast experience as an interim manager? Like he's a fireman specialist, he's an interim specialist. Do you think that's part of the reason they went for him?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, let's run through his CV, Jack. I mean, you look at his job at Hajduk Split, right? He came in with barely a month left in the season, but still end up guiding them to winning the Croatian Cup, winning at Galatasaray. When they were in massive problems, ended up qualifying them for Europe that season. I think they were having a really poor season. On the verge of nearly relegation. Came in midway through, brought them up, qualified for Europe. You look at Udinese. They lost 11 consecutive games before he walked in. He came in, picked up 7 points from his last four to help them avoid relegation. And then Udinese, they decided not to give him the job on a full-time basis. Went into the following season, ended up bringing in two guys before they returned to Igor Tudor again. And basically, they were hovering 1 point above the relegation zone when he walked in. They ended up finishing a comfortable 12th in the league that season. Then you go on to Hellas Verona. He was in there in 2021. He inherited a team that had seen two of its best players sort of depart, but yet steered them to ninth. You go into Marseille. Now, wasn't ever really in trouble at Marseille, finished third, but he walked out on his own accord because he grew tired of the football club. But if you actually go and look at the history of Marseille, players and
Yeah.
managers and all, a lot of people grow tired of that football club very,
Yeah.
very quickly when
It's a
they're within
toxic
it.
place. Yeah.
Then you go into Lazio. Lazio were in decline under Maurizio Sarri in 2024. Tudor came in, qualified then for Europe with 5 wins and 3 draws in 9 games. Then you go look at Juventus, sort of a very similar, identical run of results in the first season he was there towards the end of the campaign as he got at Lazio, end up qualifying then for the Champions League. However, he was sacked the following season after 8 games without a win. So when you look at his managerial record, what is it really telling us? Well, his reputation is more of a man who clubs turn to when they're in trouble, like you said, Jack, more of a fireman, rather, and they tend to hire him during the season rather than a guy that anyone really ever employs for the long term. And I think when he was at Marseille, he was actually asked the question more like that as well. Now, of course, he refuted it, but when you look at his CV, that's what it's telling us. When clubs are in trouble, they turn to this guy, he gets them out of trouble, and he moves on. And when he doesn't move on and they give him the following season, it doesn't work out. But at Tottenham, we are only looking for him on that interim basis and looking for him to bring exactly what he did to Udinese, Hellas Verona, Galatasaray when they're in trouble, Juve when they're in trouble towards the end of a campaign. That's exactly what we need from the guy. And that's exactly, in my opinion, why they turn to him, Jack. And I think another thing that people miss when you look at that managerial record, he has big club experience managing at Juve, Galatasaray, Marseille, Lazio, and which maybe some of the other candidates that we were looking at didn't really have. And, with big clubs, people go, the fan base is toxic when things don't go right. But that's because big clubs, with the fan base, it comes with pressure and demands. And he's shown that he can walk into them environments, and pour water on the fire, Jack.
I think he's, for the most part, in the last few clubs he's been at, he's actually done a pretty okay job. Like at Hellas Verona, like finishing 9th, that's pretty much their ceiling most of the time. Like they're not
And they sold their 2 best players.
It's not really a club that finishes that high in the Serie A really ever. And so if they're finishing 9th, like that means that's probably a decent season for someone like them. And then in Marseille, like if anyone knows, like that is a basket case of a football club. They're all the ways up and down. They'll have a huge season and then the following season will absolutely tank. They have a toxic ownership, toxic fan base where they're a huge, huge club, but they do kind of get a lot of decisions wrong. They're all over the shop, really. So to be finishing 3rd Champions League spots with Marseille, I think is pretty impressive. And this is also before they've gotten some of that recent investment, because recently under De Zerbi, right, they were being kind of given some pretty good players to work with. But before that, I don't actually remember Marseille during Tudor's time there to be given that many great players to work with. I think they as well like played us in that final Champions League game where Højbjerg got that winner. I remember they were absolutely peppering us for pretty much the whole game. We kind of just snuck out of there with that 2-1 win from, I think it was a long leg goal and, of course, the Højbjerg winner. But I remember Marseille just absolutely peppering us with, I mean, okay players, but no one I can really think of that was really that amazing. I think they had like Sanchez and like Veretout, but I can't even think of that many good players that they even had in their team at the time. So it's actually kind of impressive what he even did with Marseille, even though they did get knocked out of the Champions League. Lazio, like Dave mentioned, like Sarri was just headed down a bad direction with them. The fact that he was able to get them to qualify for Europe, Lazio are also kind of a bit of a club that sort of go up and down a lot. So for him to be able to turn them around is quite impressive. And then there was that season when he was at Juventus. I think it was last season, if I'm not mistaken, when he was at Juventus. There was a really interesting and exciting battle for the top 4 in the Serie A. There were a lot of teams in contention trying to get into the top 4. And Juventus were kind of seen as a bit of a basket case club that season. And for him to actually turn things around and get them to qualify for Europe, I think ahead of clubs like Roma, I believe another club as well in the Serie A, was also really impressive at the time. So you could say his last few jobs, in the short term, he's actually done very, very well.
Short-term success is what this guy is.
Success. He's done like more than a good job. Like he's actually done a pretty amazing job, because to come into situations like Juventus, you would say like Lazio, and as well as Marseille, those are massive clubs, Dave, have also had their problems and can be kind of all over the shop, a bit like Spurs. So it's almost like even though he has no Premier League experience, he is familiar with the situation that he's coming into a massive club that's just experiencing problems everywhere and finding a way to sort of piece it all together and get them to perform again.
Well, like, it's no coincidence that we're now the 7th club to hire him mid-season.
Yeah.
This guy doesn't get jobs in the summer transfer windows and stuff, because when you look at Juventus and Marseille and stuff, notoriously he can be difficult to deal with when he's there for a longer period. But short-term success, this guy, does it with a 7th club to hire him, and he's never been relegated, and despite walking into many clubs, that are in chaos. So, I can understand where people would be underwhelmed if they were judging him as a long-term appointment, because it's never going to work out long-term. But short-term, he's got that history of short-term success behind him, and that's exactly why we've hired him, Jack.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the reality of it.
Just going to take some good comments here from everybody. Faz Radfar saying Arsenal would have preferred to play Thomas Frank. I will be there for that game. Big up, Faz.
Sure.
Hopefully,
Oh,
bring
nice.
some good luck. But
you lucky boy.
I think you're right, man. I think if anything, like Arsenal, they would have been licking their lips to play Thomas Frank.
Yeah.
They absolutely stomped us the first game, and we're going into this game with more injuries, even less confidence that we had against Arsenal the first time around. They would have been licking their lips for another 4-0 win or something like that. At least now with Tudor, and also the fact that it is his first game in charge, you would expect the players to be a bit more fired up. You'd expect them as well to be looking to try to impress him. And also, they already know they have to save our season. So I think we'll be a far more difficult team now up against Arsenal this time around than if Thomas Frank was in charge. If Thomas Frank was in charge, I don't think any of us would be going into that game with any hope or belief, really.
Yeah. Look, for me, I just think with Thomas Frank, you're inevitable. You were going to take a beating under the guy. Arsenal are strong from set pieces, but that's not how they beat us. In the reverse fixture.
Yeah, they scored 4 open play goals, basically.
Four goals from open play. Eze scored a hat-trick, and Frank triggered Eze by going Eze who before the game. You know what I mean? And we showed that much respect towards them. They didn't have to rely on set pieces to beat us, and that was a part of the problem. And we would have entered this game with the exact same game plan, and it was never going to work. We had to make the change ahead of a North London derby to give ourselves a chance.
Yeah. Trinidad saying Igor's here for a good time, not a long time. May the force be with him, and is for this roller coaster to the end of the season. Respect, Dave and Jack. He's done well with the roller coaster situations, to be fair to him, Trinidad, and he is definitely here for a good time, but not a long time. James saying he's far more qualified than Redknapp, Sherwood, or Keane. Nostalgic appointments in this situation would have been a disaster. He's got a clear mandate, and he's also saying he's managed some huge Italian clubs and done well in those short stints. I think a lot of us are in agreement with you there, James.
I think it's hard to say Redknapp wouldn't have the experience. I mean, he's a vastly experienced manager. It's just, is he out of the game too long is the one I would take on Redknapp.
Yeah. Sean Maddox saying, in the modern age where there's an infinite amount of video footage, statistics, and analysis, I don't think the Premier League experience is as relevant as we might think. Stephen J. Cam saying, big up, guys. Whatever was behind the sacking is further evidence of bad management. The dual DOF debacle, Fabio jumping ship at the start of the window, the Lange interview. Lange 100% needs to go. Everyone can see the writing with Johan Lange. He just can't be here any longer. El Dante
is what they say in Home Alone. That's what he is.
El Dante, best of luck on your run. Really do appreciate your support as a member. And then Tartan Spurs just returning from a run. Big up to you, Tartan, our man.
Jesus, you're inspiring them all.
Everyone's
Jack.
getting in good shape.
Jack's getting his own running club together here at the Irish Hotspur. For those who don't know, Jack goes on really, really long, intense runs. So anyone that wants to vibe and, talk to him about that, feel free. People talk to me about food, so get it in the chat about running. It's probably more healthier at the end of the day.
Paul Van been saying Frank would play 6 at the back versus Arsenal. Yeah, seriously.
No, 11 at the back. That's what we've done in the Emirates. Would have done the exact same here.
And then just hoof it long to Solanke. So it sounds like Dave and I are in agreement that going with someone without Premier League experience isn't the biggest risk. And also the fact that he does really specialize as a fireman in sort of short-term stints is a good thing. He's, if anything, probably one of the most experienced interim managers in a sense, really. Yeah. So you can see how this makes sense to bring someone like him in.
Yeah, just to summarize that part up, I think, with Ange Postecoglou, didn't have Premier League experience, right? And maybe that's what people attributed our 17th place finish to last season. And then that's why the club probably pivoted towards Thomas Frank, vast Premier League experience. This won't happen again.
Yeah.
But, he's put us more in danger of relegation than what Postecoglou ever did. So, to that point, how much does Premier League experience, how much is it really relevant right now?
Yeah. J Max saying that's a positive that he even has experience in relegation dogfights. Exactly. Like, you want to bring in someone that's been in this situation before, and he's done it as well at massive clubs. Like, he's not been doing these relegation dogfights or saving a club from a bad season at smaller clubs. He's been doing it at massive clubs recently where there is a lot of pressure and intensity from the fan base, the board, everyone involved, lots of media attention. So he's familiar with this type of position that he finds himself in. Yeah.
I do wonder if the club were to hold out another couple of days, would they have brought in a Sean Dyche or something like that?
Yeah.
If they anticipated that Forest were sacking him or something like that. But look, at the end of the day, I think situation we're in, you need a guy that has experience in these situations, but at big clubs with the demands of a fan base. And this guy does have that.
And also, I don't want to compliment the club really, but I am relieved at least slightly that they sacked Thomas Frank, and then what was it? About 48 hours later, they were able to bring in Igor Tudor. My real worry was like we got to Monday, and this was the day that they would have, then had the rumorings of maybe them going for an interim. I'm glad that they at least made the decision by the start of the weekend, and not, taking the whole weekend to do it or something like that. That was also my worry was like, I had a real fear that Dave and I would be meeting up again on Monday, and we still didn't even have a new guy in charge yet.
Well, yeah, I think that was a big fear of mine. I mean, last thing you want heading into a North London derby week is still looking for a new manager. It was important to have it in place by Monday. But it was clear that they had no intent to sack Frank, because if they did, they would have already had that replacement lined up once they got rid of him. The fact that it took us like 48 hours or not more, if not a bit more, to sort of appoint this guy shows that they sacked Frank with no plan. And that's scary to think of, to be honest with you. You'd like to think, that's what their whole job is. Vinay, Lange, the Lewis family, is to pre-plan shit. And they're failing at every level.
Yeah. Let's add this, that Timmy L is coming here saying Tudor and Bragnacci are motivating us all to take up some running. What do you make of the fact, Dave, that they fired Johnny Heitinga, they fired Justin Cochran as well? They brought in, a whole new set of staff. The only person they've kept is Georgsen, the set piece coach. Thank God. I think that was a very good move by Tudor or whoever decided to do that. But it really does show that they had no plans of sacking Thomas Frank. The fact that they did, in fact, fire Johnny Heitinga, they did relieve Justin Cochran of his duties. The fact that they brought in Heitinga only for him to go 30 days later, basically, like only a month later, really does show that these people of Johan Lange and Vinay, they were going to have patience for Thomas Frank. If you were a Thomas Frank fan, you could not accuse them of not having patience for the guy. They seriously thought he was going to survive, I guess, this relegation run, or they seriously thought he was not going to put ourselves in this situation by bringing in Johnny Heitinga and then only firing him a month later. It's insane.
Well, I think Heitinga was the wrong person in the first place, but, there was a lot of talk around when we brought him in that he's going to come in and help with the backline. It's not our problem. Scoring goals is our biggest problem at this football club this season. Has been since Harry Kane left. It was our biggest problem under Ange Postecoglou, is scoring goals. So they should have brought in someone to try and help Frank in the attacking style of things rather than another defensive-minded person. And, just, again, it's more incompetence.
Yeah.
But really in terms of this guy, sort of getting rid of all Frank's staff, rightly so. I mean, there was a massive thing around Thomas Frank. He's a coach. Look at all this coaching taking place with all his coaching team. Look where it got us. And at the end of the day, they're also a part of the problem. They failed to translate their ideas across the team, so they had to go. I'm glad the one that has remained is actually Andreas Georgsen, the set piece coach, which I think is positive. I think, Tudor has looked at it and said, well, everyone else is incompetent. With the way Frank plays, it's not the way I want to play. I want to play with more intensity. So they have to go. I have to bring in my staff that can get that intensity in the way I want to play across, because them guys won't be able to do it. But what I will do is keep the set piece coach, because relatively we've been good at defending set pieces for large parts of this season. And going forward, it's what kept Frank in a job for how long this season? Was maximizing our output going forward from set pieces and stuff like that. So I think if we can add that intensity along with the set pieces, then hopefully we'll become a much more dangerous, important team. And we need goals to avoid relegation. You need to win games. It's not about picking up a point anymore. It's about going and winning games and steering yourself clear. And by doing that, you've got to go and win games. From winning games, you've got to go and score goals. So you're hoping with his coaching staff that he's brought in, along with the set piece coach, we have more than enough about us now to cause teams trouble up the other end of the pitch. I would also hope the fact that he's brought in his goalkeeping coach, Jack. I think it'd be very interesting to see if we see any improvements in Vicario's all-around game, because I think under Thomas Frank, despite him and everyone the whole project being labelled as coach, which is bizarre anyway, because most people that are at this level all have gone and done their coaching badges and everything else. They can all clearly coach. I think at this level, in terms of a manager, especially when you're managing egos, it's more about man management than and a lot of it is actually about tactics and stuff. I think if you're a good man manager, the players will go out and win you games of football and stuff. But I think the interesting thing around it is with Vicario, the way we set up from around defensive set pieces and stuff like that, and a lot of what we were doing, it's almost like they were set up to cover up Vicario's weaknesses. I want to see this goalkeeper coach come in and actually help Vicario improve himself on his weaknesses, like coming out, claiming balls, punching balls, shots from distance and stuff like that. So that'll be interesting. And I think the biggest one on the coaching staff that he's brought in, Jack, is it's been called a physical coach, but really it's a fitness coach, Riccardo Ragionacci, and basically his job is to get these players to the right fitness levels and physical condition, to be able to play this demanding style, which, again, the reason why he's been brought in is trying to help the team get up to that. However, when you're down to the bare bones it's a huge risk in terms of that workload and, bringing in a fitness coach mid-season and changing up what you're doing and stuff like that. So I'm hoping, with great risk, sometimes there's great rewards. And I'm hoping that's what this is all about, Jack.
No, yeah. I think if we are going to be playing far more aggressive, running a bit more, you do need to have someone that can just be a bit new in the coaching staff to get these players to work hard again and get them into peak physical shape. It's a little bit difficult to do that at this stage of the season, also with all the injuries that we already have. So I think they are going to have to be careful, but hopefully even the physical coach can, and probably Igor Tudor as well, at least motivate these players to run a bit more, even though they have all these injuries at the minute. That being said, it just feels like we're going to probably see like already, I think, an improvement in terms of the running, because Thomas Frank, as we saw, had pretty much every player just sitting behind the ball, just shuffling from left to right, having no intention of going forward, having no intention of really pressing for any sustained period of time. So hopefully we do get some improvement in that. I mean, he had Dominic Solanke or Richarlison at times just dropping deep and filling in with the midfielders. So hopefully we see a bit more pressing from the front, a bit more hard working off of the ball, and as well as also in any transition moment. It would be nice to see more than one or two players getting forward, because there are times under Thomas Frank where a guy would burst forward, with the ball, and he literally had no one to pass to, like no one to play off of. So hopefully under Igor Tudor, we at least have more than two players attacking at some period.
Well, I mean, that's the plan, isn't it? And I think, but the thing is, Jack, with Thomas Frank, you go back to Thomas Frank at the start of the season, Burnley, Man City games like that, we went and pressed the living hell out of them. We didn't play through them with exceptional football. We turned the ball up, higher up in the final third on the edge of their box or sometimes in their box, and score goals off the back of it. And I think that's where Frank went wrong. He failed to continue with that approach. He went completely regressed in terms of everything he'd done on the football pitch. So, the hope is this intensity with what we were doing at the start of the season, if we can bring that back, we can win the games of football that we need. And, in order to do that, you do need that fitness coach. You do need a guy that's going to, run the bollocks off them to a certain degree.
Smokehouse saying, great show, Dave and Jack. Many thanks. Do really appreciate you guys all being here with us. If you could smash the like button, we would appreciate it. And of course, keep getting in your comments and your support for the channel. It is very much appreciated. Probably going to be playing a 3 in the back, Dave. It's historically what he's done in the past. So do you feel like, 3-5-2, he's done versions of a 3-4-3 in the past. Do you think that's the right formation for us to be going with for the remainder of the season? Are you all right with that?
Look, you know me, Jack. I prefer the old 4 at the back and get extra players, sort of up the pitch. But, for me, I've sort of, over the course of this season and last season, I've actually sort of learned it's not really so much on the formation. It's really the instructions that really come around the formation in terms of what you do in possession, what you do out of possession, how intense and aggressive you are. And that's what this guy is going to bring. Like, I didn't have a problem with Frank switching to the back 3 or back 5, whatever way people want to dress it up. But it's actually how you're going to employ that system. Are you going to sit back and look to soak up pressure, which we've shown we can't do? We don't have the capability. And to be honest with you, my whole lifetime, we've never been a team that's been able to do that. Or are you going to go on the front foot and look to go and win games? And I think that's what this is all about. That's why we brought in this guy. Look, naturally, I think he prefers to play that 3-5-2. And when you look at it, a lot of what he's done at other clubs, he doesn't actually rely on out-and-out wingers. And that's where we're most injury hit, at this moment in time. We don't have a lot of wingers available to us. So I think what we're going to look at is a lot of this formation sort of being very central the way Frank almost employed it, with your two wing backs being your high and wide. But you're hoping with the different instructions employed to it, we're actually going to be playing in the opposition's half rather than defending our own half. And I think that's the big thing around this appointment and his style of play, Jack. And I think this is what this squad needs. When you look at the way we're winning games earlier on in the season, aggressive, playing in other people's halves. You know, when you look at when we were 2-0 down against City, we went for them in the second half. We were aggressive, played a lot of game in their half. This squad is clearly suited to it. And I think also by going after teams that way, I think you're also going to bring the crowd on board. And I also think you'll get a lot of these players on board. It's clear a lot of these players didn't want to play Frank's way. They didn't believe it was the right way or the right philosophy and stuff like that. And ultimately, they didn't respect the guy. And I think, you know, that's absolutely important. But speaking of respect, I think that's another thing. You know, it's clear with Thomas Frank that they didn't respect him. And I mentioned this, that, you know, I wouldn't respect him when he's isolated Basuma and brought him straight back into the squad at the first sign of trouble rather than resorting. You know, players turned up late after the North London Derby defeat. They played the next game. There's no accountability. One thing this guy is going to do, regardless of tactics and style of play, is he is going to bring some discipline. You go back and look at Marseille, go back and look at, and I know this is one of Tyler's favorite player, Dimitri Payet. He absolutely hated him when he walked in because Dimitri Payet wouldn't go and do the demands out of possession, go and press and stuff like that. And, you know, he dropped them for a while. He dropped them. It's basically, you do what I tell you to do or you're not going to play. And I think this is what this squad needs at this moment in time. No one's bigger than the football club right now. Everyone has to be all fucking hands to the pump, all hands on deck to get us out of this. And, you know, those who won't do what he wants to do, he'll have no problem dropping them. And so it's one thing having a system and a style of play, but do you have the discipline to go with it? Are you going to allow players to be scapegoated or to not carry the workload like other people are within that system? And this guy won't allow it. And I think that's also very, very important alongside style of play and what you're trying to do.
The formation options will be limited based on personnel, but I think Dave is right that the specific instructions are what really matters with this formation. I think, like, if he is going to do a back three, historically, that's what he's done. He doesn't really have a lot of options. So you would expect the back three to be Radu Dragic, unfortunately, Van de Ven, and either Archie Gray or Joao Palhinha playing as the extra center back. Hard to say which one he would go for.
Surely Danzo will be back. It's only a fucking toe.
Apparently he's out for a couple of months or something like that. At least that's what I remember it being a lot longer than I would have expected when I remember seeing the estimate. But of course, we could get back to you guys on that. But for the time being, this weekend, Dave, would you have a preference between probably Joao Palhinha? He has to play in the team no matter what. But would you rather have him in midfield or would you rather have him as that extra center back?
Well, I can tell you now, Paulinho won't have to suffer being dropped for 7 games without any explanation why he was under Frank. Tudor is going to absolutely love what Paulinho brings. And I think, you know, if he's looking at Tottenham, I think he's Frank to a certain degree. A sort of transition, make the transition a little bit easier because the club were already playing with that 3 at the back or the 5 at the back, whatever way you want to dress it up, before he's walked in here. But I think he's going to have to make the piece of the puzzle fit. And I think Joao Palhinha has shown he can be relied upon to play centre-back better than what Radu Dragic can at this moment in time. So for me, I think Tudor's smart enough to realise that, to be brutally honest with you, Jack. Yeah, I don't think he's going to look at it and go, well, I don't have 3 centre-backs available, so I'm not going to play that, especially when Joao Palhinha can sit in there and play that.
Yeah, I mean,
and Joao Palhinha, as we've seen against Man City, he's aggressive. You go back to when Ryan Shirky scored on Radu Dragic playing as left-sided centre-back, hands behind the back, jockeying, go on, have a shot on goal. This Joao Palhinha was up against Semenyo. Every occasion Semenyo even thought about pulling the trigger, who's standing in front of him? Brick wall Palhinha, straight away, getting the blocks in, and Tudor's going to absolutely love that, and he'll probably employ him on the right side. I just hope he realises Van de Ven now has to play left side and Dragic has to play the middle of a tree. Dragic is too exposed in terms of playing either side. Positionally, he gets lost, and in possession, he's not competent enough. So I hope the biggest thing he realises, which I thought Frank should have realised, is Dragic has to play the centre until Romero's back or Danzo's back.
Yeah, I think Joao Palhinha just has to be in the team no matter what, but he might be more useful playing in the back line. And then we do have options like Pop Matasar. We do have as well Conor Gallagher, and we hopefully could have some other players returning soon for the midfield to be hopeful. So I just think it's going to be that. And Archie Gray, what's nice about Archie Gray is that he can either fill in as a center back or fill in the midfield. You know, that's kind of the utility that he brings. So it probably is better just to have Joao Palhinha play in the back line and then have Archie Gray sub in for him if need be, or sub in for a Conor Gallagher or a Pop Matasar in the midfield. Maybe just have Connor or Archie Gray off of the bench for the
Mm.
majority of these games is what I would expect.
I also think, despite me thinking we need this style of play, I'd rather, to be honest with you, if we are going to get relegated, I'd rather go out swinging and having a go at teams than sitting back and submitting to teams like we were doing. But I think the problem with that is it's a more intense workload. It's a heavier workload to a certain degree. Now, I would make the argument, if you're going to sit back and you have to make 70 yards forward, what's the difference of being up front and making 70 yards back? I don't think there is too much of a difference personally. But they do say within football, playing that more intense way means it is a higher workload. You are more susceptible to injuries. And our injury record is already pretty poor. And that's the one fear I do have around this appointment. We can't afford any more players to break down. Now, to be honest with you, Frank played a less intense style, and look at the amount of injuries we were picking up anyway. So maybe that puts that sort of point to bed to a certain degree. But if this doesn't go well, that's where it's going to fuck up, is the intense style matched with the already sort of injury ravaged squad we have. And if we get more, it doesn't matter who you bring in, what style of player, we're absolutely canoed. So that's where my big worry actually comes in around this appointment in general, is the intensity and our squad not being able to live up to that.
Legend Tony, good to have you with us. Tony Yolo saying most important thing is he has big club experience and he'll get respect from the players and no skinny jeans. He has an established playing career, right? Good center back at Juventus, man mountain of a man as well. So it's not like really he's a guy that you would square up to or try to in any way lose the respect of. So he has an established playing career, which could maybe inspire some of the players or at least get the respect that way. And he's managed at big clubs, like you've said, and he's gone into dumpster fire situations at big clubs and found a way to get them going again for a short time, of course. But still, that's kind of what we need. We just need him for a short time to turn things around in a disaster case like ourselves, like he did at Marseille, like he did at Juventus and Lazio. I think that he's a decent appointment for that reason, Tony. He's been able to just turn things around quickly, gets the respect from the players, is able to turn form around and do it at massive clubs where there's a lot of attention on you. It's not like, again, he's been doing this at only small clubs. He's been doing this with clubs that have huge fan bases and also fan bases that have ultras, that have all the attention on them from the media and whatnot. So I think Igor Tudor, if anything, is coming into, despite having no Premier League experience, he's experienced with the situation he's walking into, which is a good thing, Tony. And hopefully he does get the respect from the players that Thomas Frank didn't.
Well, I think he will. You look at Dimitri Payet again, upon reflection, when he was asked about Tudor since, said, look, maybe I was a bit harsh. I sort of understand, in terms of what he was trying to do with me and stuff like that. So I do think naturally he does command respect from players, to be honest with you. I think he's one of them guys. If a player tried to backchat him, I think he'll headbutt him. Genuinely, I think he's that sort of guy. When you listen to Payet, he almost called him an authoritarian, and we know when you look at authoritarians, they don't like to be challenged, and they're certainly not going to have players challenging them, and they will make a point. And you would argue that's exactly what we need. And I think one player where I'm really looking forward to see if he can get more out of is Colin Mawani. He hasn't scored any goals in the Premier League this season. I think he's got 5 in total across all competitions. And a lot of Spurs fans have been underwhelmed. Now, with his games at Juve, I think Colin Mawani scored 5 goals for him under his tenureship. And if he can get him fit and firing, because we're not going to survive on Dom Solanke's goals alone. Yeah. We have to have someone else firing in that forward line. And
agreed.
If he can get Mawani firing again, then that'll be enough to drag us safe. At the end of the day, we've got 12 games left outside of Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, and probably Villa. The rest are all winnable. You're talking Sunderland, Forest. Under Thomas Frank, we hadn't won any single one of them, and it was scary. But now that we've changed manager, you look at some of them other games, they're winnable. And at the end of the day, we're on 29 points? 9 points out of the last 12 games should be more than enough to keep us safe. You drag yourself to that 38-point barrier, and usually that is enough to keep you up. So for me, that's all he's got to do. 12 games, give us 3 wins. It's all we fucking need.
And then Logan THFC sent in a super sticker with some hearts. Really appreciate you, Logan. Don't apologize for being late. Sorry that we're a little bit late on reacting to this, but hopefully you do enjoy the show, Logan.
That's
we really
fault.
Appreciate you.
I was really busy this weekend. A big up, Ellie.
Yeah, good to have Ellie in the house. Good to see you. Hopefully everything's good with you, Ellie. And do listen to her. Do listen to our authoritarian queen. Please, everybody, smash that like button. Good to have you, Queen Ellie. Just another question, Dave, on just the play style. His play style is supposedly very aggressive and hardworking. We were told, though, the same thing about Thomas Frank's play style, that he said we'd be aggressive, we'd be on the front foot. Do you think it could be different this time under Igor Tudor? Because we were told the same thing about Thomas Frank, and boy, was it the opposite.
Yeah, but it was all a lie. You look at his history,
Yeah,
he's never played that way.
exactly.
Never. So it was all a ruse, you know.
Kind of like Nuno when he said we would play on the front foot, like you kind of knew it would be a lie. Yeah, to some degree.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, with Thomas Frank, I think that's where he brought a lot of time for himself. Is I think, you know, one thing I think, despite me and Sean maybe being on the opposite sides of the opinion in the summer, I think the one common opinion we both held was Frank would have to adapt and change his style of football, which I never thought he could, which Sean maybe thought he could. But at the end of the day, he didn't. You know, he sort of refused. He went back to what he knew when we were in when we were in trouble. Whereas I think when you look at Tudor, his history at every club he's been at, you know, in terms of when he's been brought in mid-season, he has brought that intensity. He has brought that sort of direct style of play. He has gone and pressed teams aggressively out of possession. So, you know, at the end of the day, I'm hoping that's what we're going to get. It's not like we're asking a guy to come in and change like we done with Thomas Frank.
Yeah. Do you feel like, Dave, that this aggressive play style could benefit us? Like, do you think it could inspire the players to, put in better performances? Would you rather have gone for someone like a Sean Dychian type of person that, just sort of looks to just get results, play sort of with every man behind the ball? Do you think the players will benefit from us being a bit more on the front foot, even though we are in a relegation situation?
Yeah, look, I can only speak from my experience playing football, or my limited experience playing football, and that in my lifetime. But who doesn't prefer to play in a team that's more attacking, that wants to go after the opposition and enjoy their football? No one really wants to sit in and, defend at all costs and sort of batten down the hatches. No one wants to play like that. Now, of course, when you're at a certain level and you're in trouble, people will understand that you might need to revert to that. But that doesn't work at Tottenham Hotspur. Even with Jose and Conte, even though, they've a proven CV, everywhere else they've been bar Tottenham Hotspur, when you don't win a consecutive amount of games playing that style, you don't get the patience from this fan base, and you certainly don't get the patience from the board. So for me, I'd rather play this way, and I think the players will enjoy playing this way. You go back to the Man City game, Aston Villa in the cup, and games like that. We were 2-0 down going in at half time. We come out in the second half. We went for teams. Look how much better the players look. Look how much more they enjoyed themselves. You're talking about players that have notoriously played this way. Colin Mawani's played at big clubs. He's used to playing on the front foot aggressive. Simmons, the exact same thing. Dominic Solanke's maybe the exception. He's used to maybe playing his straight further down. But we bought him off the back of what he'd done for Iriola, or whatever that Bournemouth's manager name is now at this point. But they were playing more on the front foot, and that's where he got a lot of his goals. You look at the likes of Conor Gallagher, where he excelled under Pochettino at Chelsea, was playing more on the front foot. You look at Papa Matasar. He's a guy that loves to get around the pitch, put pressure on people. He's going to enjoy it. Romero van der Veen, although they're world-class centre-backs, they prefer to be in possession and play a little. So I genuinely think throughout what we've got, Porro, he was never going to work under Thomas Frank because defensively he's weak. But going forward, it's a different story. So for me, I actually think they will enjoy it a lot more.
I think so too. I think a lot of these players were always meant to play more of an attack brand than play defensive with every man behind the ball. I just don't think a lot of these guys really suit that. And I think as well, though, we do have good aggressive players. If he wants us to play more physical, if he wants us to be a bit more aggressive, we have guys that can do that. Gallagher is a workhorse. Sarr is a workhorse. Paulinho loves to get stuck in. We know when Romero comes back into the team, he will enjoy that sort of style of play as well. I wouldn't accuse really any of the players, or at least many of the players. Most of them are hard workers off of the ball. They do like to go after teams. They do like to press. They do like to get stuck into challenges. We've even been labeled as a bit of a dirty team this season with some of the challenges that we make on people. Xavi Simons, as much as he's a bit small and a bit light, likes to get stuck in, likes to put in a challenge. So I think this could benefit us, having a guy that wants to play a bit more aggressive, wants to be a bit more on the front foot. It could suit really a lot of these players, to be honest.
I'd also argue some of the sending offs we've seen this season, some of the petulant fouls, have been more born out of frustration because of the way they've been playing and stuff, rather than actually a lack of discipline and stuff. You know, of course, if we are going to be aggressive, there does have to be an element where it is controlled aggression as well. Can't be over the top reckless.
I totally agree. One of the last questions, Dave, is do we have to prioritize Premier League games over the Champions League? Do you think
Yeah,
that's
interesting.
an unfortunate situation we find ourselves in where the Champions League games are only just around the corner, really? I think we're going to be having the first rounds this week, right, with some of the teams. But do you feel like, yeah, the Champions League is going to have to be put on the back burner for now?
Well, I think as it stands, I think we have to prioritize Premier League status over a shot
Especially
at
with the
European
injuries.
glory,
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think the club made the decision last season based off they were safe from relegation. There was never a really threat, and that's why they made that decision then to go after Europa League to try and salvage European football for this season. This season, we don't have the luxury. You look at the teams below us; they're in better form than us at this moment in time. West Ham, they've won. They've won. Oh, sorry, they've lost one of their last 5 games, winning 3, drawing 1. Burnley, have picked up points, winning 1 and drawing 2 in their last 5 games. Nottingham Forest, despite sacking Sean Dyche, I've done all right. Leeds United now are ahead of us. They're picking up points. So I think it is at a point where we do have to prioritize our Premier League campaign. However, I would argue, from the North London Derby, then we've got Fulham the 1st of March and Palace the 5th of March. I don't think our Champions League games will be before them. I'm guessing our Champions League games will be sort of between the 5th of March and the 15th of March, between the Palace and Liverpool game onwards. So, I mean, if we can take a result from the North London Derby and go and beat Fulham and Palace, then all of a sudden you're clear, which then means then you can put your priority, you can sort of go after the Champions League to a certain degree. So I think the next 3 games under this guy will actually dictate is the answer I have for your question there, Jack.
No, I agree with that. I think that's what I mentioned maybe a little while ago on the stream, that if he can pick up some results quite quickly, all of a sudden we can then maybe focus our attention back on the Champions League. But for right now, have to focus on winning games in the Premier League, have to focus on distancing ourselves from the 18th position, really. But if he can do that relatively quickly, all of a sudden then we can enjoy what we were able to do last season under Ange, which was we knew we were safe no matter how far we dropped in the Premier League. We knew we were not going to drop to 18th.
Yeah.
But so then it gave us that privilege of being able to just focus on the European games. And if Igor Tudor can turn things around quickly and get us some points straight away in the Premier League, he'll be able to do kind of similar to what Ange did, which is just focus on the Champions League, not really worry about the Premier League games much longer. But like you said, that would require wins against Fulham, wins against Palace, and some other teams as well in order to do that. So I would say prioritize the Premier League first. Then if you do it well enough, you can then focus on the Champions League. But for right now, I mean, if the Champions League game were tomorrow, you would still be focused on the Premier League game. But luckily, that is the one benefit of getting to the next rounds, is that, or qualifying for, the being in the top 8, is that we luckily do not have a Champions League game this week.
Well, the thing is, if I'm Tudor, though, Jack, as well, I'm walking in and I'm saying, guys, obviously right now we have to prioritize Premier League safety. But if you can pick up results and a couple of wins over the next 3 games, that steers us clear, and then I can give you a good run at the Champions League. If you don't do that, none of you will be playing them Champions League games. So for me, I think then there's a clear incentive to the squad for the next 3 games. So to your point, if he can pick up results immediately, it gives us a chance to go after it. If we don't, forget about it. The club will not allow him to do it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's about all I had, Dave. Is there any other points that maybe, I've forgotten, or any questions that
I think we've covered it like pretty well,
Yeah.
I think we've covered it, to a lot. At the end of the day, last thing is Tudor, he's got 12 games. The objection is Premier League safety, and hopefully he can do that, Jack.
Yeah.
Best of luck to him, and I would hope everyone gives him a chance. And the amount of chances Thomas Frank got, I'd hope people have one more left to be able to give this guy his opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's going to be our savior or paint him out to be our savior, but I think what we've done here is try to give people the logic behind bringing him in.
Yeah, it's definitely come out of left field. It was very unexpected. I don't think anyone touted him as the option to come in and save us, but I don't mind it, actually. I really don't. I'm not necessarily, I would say in any way a skeptic or any way, being negative towards it. I think it's actually a decent, guy to bring in for the most part, especially with the situation we find ourselves in. I just didn't even think of him as an option, really, because most of the time we do think of people with Premier League experience, but there was some decent points made by yourself, Dave, as well as Sean, that how much does Premier League experience even mean nowadays? With how Thomas Frank was one of the most experienced Premier League managers, was well liked by everyone who was a Premier League fan, and look how he did. He ended up being the worst top 6 Premier League manager. Graham Potter, Nuno's, like, doesn't necessarily go as far as you might think. So
you look at Nuno, at Tottenham, Premier League experience. Look how that went. So
yeah.
Although it's probably an added bonus to your CV or might help you out more because you understand the league a little bit more, maybe, but it's not the be all and end all.
Yeah, it's more of a cliche now, I think, instead of it actually being, like you said, a real decisive factor. Queen Ellie, we're a mess. Igor Tudor has a lot of work to do. 100%. He's got a big cleanup job ahead of him. Queen Ellie, hopefully, like we say, he can pick up a couple early wins, get something against Palace and Fulham. And then from there, we can start to maybe look at the Champions League as our saving grace to at least have something that we're still in to look forward to, because I think we might have missed out on our chance to still qualify for a European spot. If he picks up a lot of wins, maybe we might find ourselves there. But it is really just about surviving relegation and then hopefully go on some type of run in the Champions League, ideally. Big up, Ellie. Really appreciate
albeit
it.
Being in a different league, he does have experience to roll up his sleeves and do the hard work that's needed to steer teams to safety. So,
yeah. Dropkick your teacher. We're wrapping up here, everybody. So if you can, do smash the like button for us. We would really appreciate it. Dropkick your teacher, saying it's not that I don't believe in him. It's more so the mess that we're in. I think we're in trouble. He's stubborn and has an aggressive playing style.
Yeah.
I'd be less concerned if we had players. The injury situation is by no means an easy one that he's walking into. That's the part I do feel for him, is that all these players are tired. They're dropping like flies. He wants to play an aggressive front-footed style, but he barely has anyone to pick from. So that is difficult to walk into. I'm curious how he will handle that. Thank you, Tom, by the way.
And if you have liked the show, guys, or you've disagreed with everything we have to say, we will be running a fan show Wednesday evening. Feel free to grab, if you haven't already, your fan show membership and come and air your concerns or that with us.
We will see you next time, though, everybody. Do really appreciate you, and come on, you Spurs, as always, and best of luck to you, Igor Tudor. Hopefully, you can save us.
Come on, you Spurs. Welcome to Tottenham, Igor.